something that I learned recently with this digital marketing superb guy by the name of Norik Amin. He taught me a lot of things that I have not really understand. He put it into very simple language that any layman can understand, and I'm grateful that I'm in one of his classes. So as you see now, I am at a very different kind of setting to do this taping. I am perfecting my act. In other words, that there's still a lot of room for improvement, especially I'm doing this as a hobby, and also to find out whether there are any ways that I can use what I learn and help other people in future by sharing my mistakes, and also by sharing things that I feel to achieve, because I believe a lot of people are not are afraid to start because they are afraid of the failure. So if I feel for them already, then at least they have a little bit more of bravery in them whenever they want to do something. So anyway, the other reasons I'm doing this taping is to share another book that I'm reading. Since I'm reading it, I might as well share it on video through YouTube or other on my social media, because sometimes you try to cram too many things. So hopefully when you listen to my voice, it brings you some calmness. As I read the book, I will also be sharing some of the experience as the thoughts come in. So before you say anything or judge anything, those are my personal thoughts and have no relation to anybody else. It's just the learning that I had, and sometimes when I read the sentence, it brings out the joy, the pain, the learning. So I just make a comment of my own. So please enjoy the first part of this book. Yesterday I already done the other part, which is her face. That is without my face. It's supposed to be her face, but during that time I was not ready. If you listen to that tape, you will understand what I mean. So today we are reading secret number 1 from the book, The 13 Secrets of Power Performance by Roger Dawson. Okay, secret number 1. Power performance make their life an adventure. Interesting. Okay, the quote from Jawaharlal Nehru. There is no end to the adventures that we can have if only we seek them with our eyes open. Again, different people, different meaning. Sometimes you open your eyes and then you don't see. So what he actually meant is to be insightful. I think that's what he wants us to be. The other quote is, men spend most of their lives worrying about things that never happen, by Moliera. I'm not sure whether I pronounced the name right. It's Moliere. One who has any faith in God should be ashamed to worry about anything whatsoever. This quote is from Mahatma Gandhi. Good things don't happen to you. Bad things don't happen to you. Life is what happens to you. How true. The more you examine the events in your life and categorize them into good things and bad things, the more messed up you are going to become. Roger Dawson, the writer's quotation. What would you do it? Would you do it all again? I don't know what he's asking, but I guess I will. Let's start our journey to power performance with a question. If you could be given the chance to live your life again and accept repeat of what you've experienced to this date, would you want to do it again? Funnily, this is what I actually spoke on when I was in the authentic live with the group. I said I will. Without those pain, without those shame, without those disappointment, I am not a happier me today. But again, this is my opinion. Now let's continue with the book. Imagine that if you say yes, you immediately go back to your 5th birthday and relive your life day by day exactly the way it has been, without any opportunity to change a thing and without knowing what will happen to you next. Also, you won't have the benefit of wisdom you pick up the first time through. You must muddle through just as before. Benjamin Franklin once addressed this issue. He said, "Were it offered to my choice, I should have no objection to a repetition of the same life from its beginning, only asking the advantages authors have in a second edition to correct some faults in the first. Then when you catch up with today, your life goes on exactly as it would from this point on. Would you do it now? Since it's put it that way, will I do it?" Good question. But again, though it's painful, I will do it again. Another quotation from Samuel Butler: "Life is like playing a violin in public and learning the instrument as one goes on." Wow, that's a beautiful way to learn. How nice. It's an interesting question, isn't it? It directly relates to power performance for a very simple reason. The more fun you have at doing something, the better you do it. The more joy you see is in being alive, the better you'll succeed. In your career, with your financial plans, and in your family and your social life. The more you see your life as an enriching experience instead of as a hustle, the more energy and passion for living you will have. Try that question on your friends later and you'll find a few will immediately say, "Oh yes, of course, I love every exciting moment of it, and I'll give my right arm to do it again." However, the vast majority will point out that although they enjoyed life, it was also quite a hustle, a struggle. Rather than repeat it, they'll take their chance with the future. At the start of this century, Julius Renard considered this proposition and came up with this conclusion: "If I were to begin life again, I should want it as it was. I would only open my eyes a little more." This quotation from Tallulah Bankhead: If I had to live my life again, I'll make the same mistakes, only sooner." Yeah, that's why I want to live it again. Exactly. I will make the same mistake, only sooner. The best approach to life. The experience of life should be like that of a child spending the day at Disneyland. In 1960, soon after the original Disneyland opened in an orange grove in Anaheim, I was a photographer on board a British ocean liner that was visiting Los Angeles. There are dozens of exciting things to do during a brief visit to the Southern California, so it amazed me how many of passengers wanted to spend their entire time ashore at Disneyland. Because of this, I became skeptical about the lure of this amusement park. What kind of person would rather spend a day riding roller coaster than seeing Beverly Hills, the Hollywood Bowl, or visiting a movie studio? It wasn't until 1963, after I had migrated from England to California, that I finally got to go myself. As it had millions before, the Magic Kingdom captivated me. Far from being a mere amusement park, it was wonderful recreation of those magic moments in our childhood when everything seemed so exciting that we want to burst with joy. I was at the Tokyo Disneyland soon after it opened, and the expressions on the faces of the little children fascinated me. If children everywhere would remember the lessons they learned during their first visit to Disneyland and apply them to life in general, they would have always find life an exciting adventure. 1. Children approach the park with excited anticipation, eager for experience. Although the Japanese culture tells them to stay reserved and formal, they abandon these the moment they enter the magic kingdom. They go wild with excitement. Number 2, they overcome their fear of the unknown. Number 3, they know where there will be problems during the day, such as rain and long lines, and they accept that not all of it will be pleasant. Finally, they know the fast rides will scare them. Although this may not seem very challenging to you, to a 5-year-old they are formidable. Nevertheless, they love every minute of it, leave it only when their parents force them to, and they would do it all over in a minute. Children always seem to get great pleasure out of what they do and would love to go back and do it again. It's as we get older and take on the cares and responsibilities of life that we begin to question whether life is that much of an adventure. When she was 80 years old, Helen Keller said, "I have kept young, trying never to lose my childhood sense of wonderment. I'm glad I still have a vivid curiosity about the world I live in." Do you have? How much are you enjoying life? Well, this is a very big question, especially during the pandemic, especially now. Isn't it shocking that surveys tell us that most of us don't like the work we do and would quit if it weren't for the money? The Los Angeles Times did a survey of workers in Orange County, California, which is one of the best places to work in the country. For me, that means it must also be one of the best places in the world. The sun shines year-round, everything is new and fresh, and you can ski in the morning and sail in the afternoon. Even in this paradise, they found that only 24% of workers describe themselves as very satisfied with their pay. Only 44% said that the work they did satisfied them. Isn't that something? Even in the great environment, 56% of workers didn't like the work they did and were doing it only for the money. And 76% of them weren't happy with the money they were getting. No wonder we spend so much time of our lives looking forward to the future for happiness and contentment, rather than relishing the moment as a power performance always does. Ask one person how he feels about life, and he tell you it's a constant struggle, a hustle just to survive. He'll tell you people are always unfair to him. Is anybody being unfair to you? I want you to take a second to think about it. Or are you being unfair to yourself? Which is what? Okay, let's continue. I hope you find the answer. And even his bearings tells you that the most he hopes for is to reach the end of his life before some tragedy overtakes him. I remember sharing a ski lift with a person like this at Mammoth Mountain, a great ski resort on the east side of Sierra Nevada, south of Reno. The lift ride was less than 10 minutes long, but the look at some of the negative things he shared with me during that time. Wow, 10 minutes with a negative person. You will teach me a lot of things. One of the barrel lifts has stopped and the skiers were sitting there patiently waiting for it to start again. My companion observed, they are going to be there for a long time. They'll probably have to send someone out from Washington, D.C. to inspect it. The second comment he made, if the cable breaks, it'll kill you even if you fall slowly. You don't have to fall fast. The lift started up again a few minutes later. The third comment he made, we were watching some teenagers come swooping down on snowboards, having the time of their life and whooping and hovering as they went. He said, snowboards should be banned. I bumped into this kid once and I was furious. I said, come here, you little runt. Finally, a little further up, I was admiring a paraplegic who was thundering down the slope on sit ski. These are like tricycles with snow runners where the wheels would normally be. Just I thought what an inspiration this skier was going to be out there, even though he was paralyzed from the waist down. My companion said, if I was that way, I'll pull the plug. If you can't golf or make love, to use an expression that looks something in translation from his vernacular, I said pull the plug. You have lots of people like that, so just be blessed. You see them, then you know how blessed you are. How depressing. As we approached the top, he said, do you want to ski this run together? I said, no, I don't want to ski with you. With an attitude like yours, you're disaster waiting to happen. So he skied off alone with his little black cloud hanging over him like a balloon tied to the waist of an avalanche patroller. So sad. A very good way of telling. The next subtitle, how power performers look at life. Power performers attitude, however, couldn't be more different. For them, life is truly an exciting adventure. They never had enough time for everything. For them, every day brings new challenges and rewards. They are always meeting new people and discovering new ideas. If they should happen to think of dying, it saddened them to think how death could deprive them of such joy of living, never again to be overwhelmed by the beauty of a sunset or a mountain peak covered with snow, never again to feel the thrill of overcoming a challenge, and never again be moved to laughter, ecstasy, or tears by someone they love. To become a powerful performers, we must first get so excited about life and what we are doing with these few precious years we spend on earth. That's what we can hardly stand it. Yeah, I used to be very fearful of death. But I don't know when I started to realize that, hey, I'm dying. So why worry about it? Might as well live every moment as if there's no tomorrow. And then life gets better, honestly. Life becomes so much better now once I offload that kind of thoughts. Power performers all have one thing in common. Did I read the line before that? Okay, let me retract. To become a power performer, we must first get so excited about life and what we are doing with these precious years we spend on earth that we can hardly stand it. Right. Power performers all have one thing in common. They love life. The very realization that their life charges them up so much that they approach everything they do with a special gusto. Whether they are working on a tricky business opportunity or swinging through a golf ball or roaring down a freeway, they approach everything they do with a terrific zest for living. Have you ever noticed that it's hard to tell if a power performer is working or playing? They give everything they have to everything they do. You'll find power performers everywhere, working 7 days a week to get a new business venture off the ground, or up in the mountains putting finishing touches to log cabin they built from the ground up, or working past midnight in a laboratory somewhere exploring the frontier of new technology. And they do it all with the fever of Meriwether Lewis and William Clark exploring the Louisiana Purchase. Although power performers treat works like play, in their spare time you find them sailing in the Mediterranean, trekking in the Himalayas, clinging to a rock face in Peru, or scuba diving in the Caribbean. Totally absorbed and exhilarated by the experience. I remember scuba diving with my son Dwayne off the white coast of Mexico just south of Puerto Vallarta. The local scuba diving shop has its own little beach there with a few grass-roofed huts where you can relax and picnic after your dive. We did a morning dive with a group that had come out from town on the launch, and then Dwight and I did a second afternoon dive. Our guide took us to an incredible cliff stretching from about 100 feet under the surface down into the depths of the ocean. We plunged down to where you can no longer see the surface and the water begins to turn black. I turned to the cliff and imagined that I was high on a mountain wall with a mile of empty spaces beneath me and only a few more feet to go to the summit. I had some experience of laborious climbing, such as cliffs in the Himalayas and the Andes, where every move takes a supreme effort. But here I could float up and down the wall with the incredible feeling of weightlessness the scuba diving gives me, or weightlessness that scuba diving gives me. What an experience! I felt like an eagle floating and swooping and soaring at will. In my reverie, I remember Jacques Cassot and Emil Gagnon invented scuba equipment less than 50 years ago. Think of the great men and women of history who never had an opportunity to do what I was doing. The experience so exhilarated me that I began to think of Alexander the Great, who wept because there were no new worlds for him to conquer. Of course, the wonders of the deep sea existed then, but Alexander had the misfortune to be a power performer born too soon, before he had a chance to explore them. Suddenly, I realized that our guide was tugging at one of my fins. I rolled over and looked up at him. He was silhouetted against the bright light of the sun that was creating a circle on the surface far above us. Come up now, he urgently signaled. I checked my air gauge and saw that I had plenty of time left. I flashed him the OK sign and tapped my watch to let him know I wanted to stay down longer. He waggled his finger at me and pointed urgently to the surface. So I reluctantly followed him and left behind one of the most euphoric experiences of my life. When we were back in the boat, I found out why the guide was so insistent on my coming up. He didn't speak English well enough to explain, but my son, who had been to dive school, knew. He does things like going to classes unlike me. If I want to do something, I tend to go do it and learn about the difficulties as I go. Take the sailboat out. If you sink it, go back and get another one until you get it figured out. Slap the software in the computer and start playing with it. It shouldn't stun you, but if it does not call the support line, who has time to read all those manuals? So like me, Dwayne told me that when you stay down deep for long, the nitrogen balance in your bloodstreams changes and you experience an incredible high. It's dangerous because you're having so much fun that you don't want it to end. Whether it was nitrogen narcosis or natural euphoria, it stays in my mind as a wonderful experience. But even that must be nothing compared to the thrill of being in space. Imagine being in an environment where you can see to infinity and can float with more freedom than an eagle. Imagine floating through the airlock to do spacewalk, knowing that you would go into orbit just like your space shuttle. Your forward velocity perfectly synchronized to the pull of gravity so that the curvature of your fall exactly matches the curvature of the Earth. It's called, I don't know how you pronounce it. It's called, it's Curvature. I pronounce it Curvature, something like that. To look at spaceship Earth and see your entire world in a single gaze. How it must change your soul. As Archibald MacLeish said, to see the earth as we now see it, small and blue and beautiful in the eternal silence where it floats, is to see ourselves as riders on the earth together, brothers on the bright loveliness in the unending night, brothers who see now they are truly brothers. I can't wait to go. You don't have to choose between adventure and success. Power performers understand that when you are doing something you love to do, you transform your energy level. When what you are doing excites you and you are moving towards an objective with positive expectancy, there is virtually no limits to what you can accomplish. Then the energy and success drive that you nurture in pursuit of adventure will pay off in your career too. Take Frank Wills for example. He was president of Warner Brothers, apparently at the pinnacles of his career in motion picture. He was always reminiscing, however, of the days when he was student at Pomona College in California and used to dream of being the first man to climb Mount Everest. In those days, that was what going to make him famous. He could still remember the day in 1953 when somebody from his fraternity called and told him that he had waited too long. Some guy named Hillary just climbed it, he told Wills. The following years, Wells was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University and wanted to plan a grand adventure for his spring break. He knew a friend who had a pilot license, so they pooled their money, bought a $600 plane and agreed to fly to Cape Town and back. Frank's job was to arrange the landing permits in the more than 20 countries in which they would have to refuel because the tiny plane only had 500-mile range. The day before they left, his friend gave him a book on navigation and told him that he had been too busy to read it. Frank stayed up all night learning the fundamentals and learned the rest on the job. As they approached Mount Kilimanjaro, which straddled the Kenya-Tanzania border, Frank impulsively suggested that they climb it. Nobody who has seen Kilimanjaro will ever forget the sight of the huge mountain that sits so close to the equator and yet is covered year-round, snow-covered year-round. Driving south from Nairobi with my daughter Julia, when we climbed the mountain, we were so stunned by the sight that we asked our driver to pull over so that we could absorb its magnificence. For miles around, the plains of Africa stretch off into the distance. It's the sheer sight of mountain that astonishes you when you see it. It rises from only a little above sea level to 19,710 feet, but it is so huge it doesn't look as a mountain should with the sharp summit. Instead, it grows slowly from the plains, converging on the square-off summit. The top blew off in a volcano explosion millions of years ago from 50 miles in every direction. The other astonishing thing is the contrast between the heat of the equatorial plains below and the snow-covered summit above. Climbers once found the carcass of a leopard near the summit, but no one has ever been able to explain what drove it to make the enormous effort needed to get there. This fascinated Ernest Hemingway, and he made it the analogy of his short story about an adventurer who lay dying after a plane crash near the mountain. Before he dies, he reviews his adventures in his mind and tries to make sense of things he has done with his life. The conclusion appears to be that there may have been no reason why the leopard was at the top of the mountain, any more than there is reason why we do many of the things we do with our lives. Hemingway started to write the story when he lay in critical condition after a plane crash while sightseeing in Uganda. Hemingway was lucky to survive. Harry, the hero of his story, was not so fortunate and died of gangrene poisoning. Although when Hollywood made a movie of the snows of Kilimanjaro, they had the nerve to give it a happy ending. Frank Wills and his friends make it to the top of the mountain, and it became a seminal moment in his life. However, they never make it to Cape Town. Soon after leaving the mountain, they were forced to make an emergency landing that destroyed their plane. Back home, he limited his climbing to going up the corporate ladder, something at which he was far more adept. 26 years would pass before he would climb again, this time Mont Blanc in France. Thinking that he had climbed the tallest peak in Europe, a dream started to form in his mind. He had climbed the tallest peak on 2 continents. Well, he thought, why not go for all 7? He had found a new challenge. He wanted to be the first person to climb the highest peak in all 7 continents. Even when he found out that Mont Blanc isn't the tallest peak in Europe, Mount Elbrus in Russia take the honors. It didn't discourage him. He teamed up with 53-year-old Dick Bass, the owner of Snowbird Ski Resort in Utah, who shared his dream and set out on his grand adventure. At first, he didn't treat it seriously enough and was trying to squeeze the climbs in between his duties at Warner Brothers. He and Dick impulsively decided to attempt Mount Elbrus just a few weeks after they met. Because Dick was going to be in Europe anyway, researching new ideas for his ski resort. Mount Elbrus is 18,510 feet high, so it is not as high as Kilimanjaro, but Frank was now 28 years old. He collapsed in exhaustion, 1,500 feet from the summit. He collapsed in exhaustion 1,500 feet from the summit. When he returned to America, he decided to get back into shape by climbing Mount Rainier in Washington. Because it is only 14,410 feet high, it shouldn't have posed a serious challenge to a man who was thinking of conquering Everest. But again, he collapsed in exhaustion before reaching the top. Finally, Frank realized that if he were to realize his dream, he would have to make climbing a full-time obsession. But was it worth quitting his president job at Warner Brothers? He had worked for decades to reach his pinnacles of success in the entertainment business, and he doubted anyone would give him another opportunity to head up a major studio. After 2 days of organizing, he made his decision and quit his job. I guess you and me also will do so. However, even this commitment was not enough to turn things around for Frank. He enthusiastically joined Dick for a climb for Aconcagua in Argentina and make it to 20,500 feet, his personal best, but he was still 2,300 feet from the summit when he collapsed. In spite of this discouragement, he continued with the plan to climb Everest. He and Dick had bought their way onto a Louis Tucker expedition that would attempt to climb Everest from the north side out of Tibet. 2 climbers died in separate accidents, including Marty Hui, who had been a ski instructor at Bass Snowbird Resort, and climbed on Aconcagua with them. Despite this expedition continued, and although one climber made it within 1,500 feet off the summit, Frank made it to 24,000 feet, still his personal best. Finally, things started to turn around for Frank. In 1983, he and Dick returned to conquer Aconcagua, the highest peak in South America. Then they returned to the tallest of them all, Everest, at 29,000 28 feet but failed to reach the top. By now, Frank was achieving more with every climb, and he reached the South Pole, the saddle, at 26,200 feet, less than 3,000 feet from the summit. If it hadn't been for another sick climber, he would have made it to the top. Undeterred, they lined up a third Everest expedition for later in the year and went on to climb Mount McKinley in Alaska and Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. Then they returned to Mount Elbrus in Russia and reached the top in July. Their next peak, Mount Vinson in Antarctica, was a logistical nightmare. At 16,067 feet, it was not very tall, but was so remote and has such torturous weather that it presented the biggest challenge of them all. Then they went on to the easiest of them all, Mount Kosciuszko in Australia, at only 7,310 feet a walk. They evidently decided not to consider 16,500 foot Mount Java in Indonesia part of Australian continent, although it is in Australasia. That left only one climb, the return to Mount Everest. Remember, neither of these men were very experienced mountain climbers, and both were too old to be going over 20,000 feet, much less than 29,028 foot summit of Everest that have already killed more than 50 top mountaineers. Frank's wife Luann finally put a stop to it, convinced that Frank would kill himself on Everest rather than give up. Dick Best went on to complete the 7th summit, the first person to do that and the oldest person ever to climb Everest. The fascinating part of this story, told brilliantly in their book, 7 Summit, isn't so much the climbs as what happened to Frank Wills afterward. He'd given up his job as president of Warner Brothers, thinking he was sacrificing his career for this one shot at adventure and glory. However, when he returned, Walt Disney Studio hired him to be their president, and he went on to do incredible job leading the company to a stratospheric success. Leaving Warner Brothers turned out to be the best career move he could have made. Although he was later killed in a helicopter skiing accident, he would never have known how much he would accomplish in his career without the brave heart of an adventurer. What can we learn from this story of Frank Wills and the 7 Summits? You don't have to choose between adventure and success. Stop thinking what you have to sacrifice the things you really want to do in life because of your career. If that were true, I would say the price is too high. Power performers know that you don't have to choose between adventure and a career. They can have it all because the energy and success drive their nature. Success drive their nature. Anyway, as I read it, and success drive their nature in pursuit of adventure pays off in their careers too. You probably won't be choosing between adventure and career when you are at the pinnacles of your industry the way Frank Wills did. I would not. But I'm blessed that I can now and enjoy every moment of it as an adventure instead of as a career. My golfing buddy Michael Crow called me up one Monday. He wanted to fly to England to attend his brother's 50th birthday party that Friday and then stay over to see the Raiders Cup golf match they were playing near his hometown of Coventry. He really couldn't afford to take the time off and he felt guilty about spending the money. But I was proud of him when he decided to go anyway. He will savor the memory long after he's forgotten how much it cost. I remember when I was 20 and I had started a promising career with a retail chain in England that sold televisions and appliances. Within a year, I could have been a store manager. Then an opportunity came along to take a 2-week cruise through the Mediterranean as a ship photographer. If I did well, the company will send me out on another ship and it will become a full-time job. Now picture this, I was 20 at that time and living at home without any financial obligation. So on the one hand, a good future in business lay ahead of me. On the other hand, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take off and see the world. Looking back, I can't believe it was a decision that would take more than 10 seconds to make. But at the time, I was very hesitant about giving up my secure sales job. Eventually, this fleeing adventurer decided to try his wings and flew off to the adventure of world travel. It was the smartest decision I ever made because it led to my visiting America and immigrating here a year later. Now I take 2 months off a year so I can go adventuring, and I will turn down any speaking engagement during those months. The people in my office won't even take the time to tell me about any opportunities because they know what my response will be. Although sometimes they can't resist keeping track of the talks they turn down and calling me to say, Roger, do you realize the trip you're taking has already cost you 30,000 and you haven't even left yet? It doesn't matter to me. I want the speaking business to still excite me 20 years from now as much as it does today. Living a fulfilled, exciting adventure life is what keeps me my energy and enthusiasm up. You don't have to take a trip around the world to be an adventurer. It's a matter of attitude, not destination. Perhaps you have been dreaming of playing golf at Pebble Beach or renting a sailboat in a Virgin Island. Go to it. I bet it won't cost as much as you think it will, and in the long run it won't cost anything because you are quickly recoup the outlay with your renewed enthusiasm and energy. Which brings me to law of attraction. I was just practicing this, what he mentioned, of course not 2 months away because with the pandemic and everything, you can't even move away from your house. So what I did is I decided to give myself 10 hours off, not looking at email, not looking and answering at WhatsApp message, what sort or what not, just being myself, enjoying my things, doing it this kind of activity, allowing myself to have these 10 hours once every Thursday. I just started it yesterday. I tell you, it's so wonderful. I just enjoy myself to the fullest, and I hope you can do it also. Even a few hours, set it aside just for yourself. It is so different. The power of serendipity. You don't have to climb the world's tallest mountains. Be an adventurer. You can turn the most mundane experiences into exciting adventures if you learn to harness the power of serendipity. English writer Horace Walpole made the word serendipity popular when he based his story The Three Princes of Serendip on a Persian fairy tale about the adventures of three princes who make accidental but fortunate discovery. The word serendipity has come to mean good luck in running through things for which you weren't looking. I love to travel, but I hate package tour, same as me. I have 10 times the fun and excitement when I just take off to another country and let serendipity be my guide. Once you let those delightful adventures seek you out, the exciting things that happen around you will astonish you. Often it's the road less traveled, as Robert Frost put it, that will fascinate you the most. For at the end of that road lies adventure. Incidentally, Frost has a delightful sense of humor and a power performers believe in not taking himself too seriously. He made his fame and fortune by writing poems about wonders of nature in New England, where he'd made his home. Once, after a dinner party, he and several other guests went out on the veranda to watch the sun go down. "Oh, Mr. Frost, isn't it a lovely sunset?" exclaimed a young woman. Frost put his arm around her and smiled. "I never discuss business after dinner. Let me give you a couple of examples of serendipity at work. In 1977, a group of friends and I planned a trip to the base camp of Mount Everest. I'll tell you more about the trip later. 4 of us were from California and one was from Arizona, but we decided to fly separately to Nepal and meet up there for a trek into the Himalayas. On my way to Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal, I arranged stopovers in London where I visited my favorite uncle who was close to death in cancer ward, and in Delhi, the capital of India. I've been in India before, but never these cities, so I was very curious about the life there. I could have had my travel agent fill my 3-day stay with bus tours and group activities, but I saw everything and enjoyed it so much more with serendipity. So many people who travel are afraid of missing anything because they may never be back. I always assume that I will return one day and would much rather spend my time seeing what I want to see rather than frantically racing from one place to another. My rule when travel is to never let the fear of missing something stop you from experiencing the joy of the unexpected. Early first morning, I left my hotel and wandered over to one of the huge traffic circles near the main government buildings. I sat down on the grass and waited for serendipity, for a happy accident. After a while, a snake charmer and his young assistant made their way over and began talking to me. What was this it? I wondered as they set down their wooden reed basket and the charmer began to play his flute. It intrigued me because I knew it wasn't the sound of the flute that aroused the snake, but the tapping of the owner's foot next to the basket. Slowly the lid of the basket moved and the python swayed up in the air. I gave the snake charmer a few rupees and he moved on. That wasn't the fortunate accident I was waiting for. I propped my head on a knapsack and watched the incredible assortment of traffic as it passed by. Motor scooters with women in their saris riding side saddle, horse-drawn buggies, tiny open buses holding 6 to 8 people, and pedal-driven rickshaws. I thought about Gandhi, who once asked what he thought about Western civilization. "I think it would be a good idea," he dryly replied. My favorite story about this great leader concerned his insistence that he always traveled with common men over the protests of Lord Mountbatten, who worried about Gandhi's safety. If Gandhi determined to travel on a train with the untouchables, Mountbatten, without Gandhi's knowledge, would have them all especially selected and security screened. Mountbatten once remarked, "He has no idea how much it costs to keep him in poverty." Half an hour went by and then an elderly Indian approached me. He spoke well and dressed neatly, although his clothes were obviously very old. He told me that his name was Nelson, like the naval hero from the Battle of Trafalgar. He had learned English as an orderly from a British officer when he was a young man. We chatted until I began to feel comfortable with him, and then I asked him if he would like to show me around the city. He suggested a small fee, about $5 a day. Nelson stayed with me for the next 3 days and kept his promise to show me New Delhi as an Indian would see it. We rode in every form of transportation, ate in all the local restaurants. He showed me Gandhi's tomb and spoke lovingly about how he was the last Indian leader who truly understood the soul of the people. That night we went to the sound and light show at the old fort, and I learned from him how the invasion of Mongols, the Muslims, and later the English traders have changed the culture of his country forever. I learned more about India in those 3 days that I would have in a month of bus tour. I asked Nelson to meet me again when I finished my trip to Mount Everest and returned to New Delhi. When I got back to the city a month later, there was a mix-up in my hotel reservation and I had to move to a different hotel. Concerned that I would miss Nelson because they would not let this old man who looked like a beggar into a hotel without me, I tipped the doorman to look out for him. Later the day, Nelson found me. Although he looked as though he hadn't bathed in the month that I'd been gone, I lent him my shower and told him to soak in my bathtub for as long as he wanted. The next day, we rode a bus out to fabulous Taj Mahal. Instead of taking me straight to it, he took me first to a fort around the bank of the river Yamuna. He could have pointed out the Taj Mahal, but instead he chose to let me discover it for myself. I was standing on the balcony of the fort when I glanced along the river, and there was the Taj Mahal simmering in the heat, rising out of the white mist that was rising above the river. Very seldom does something as familiar to you in this picture as the Taj Mahal stun your senses when you see it. When you first see it. Okay. When you first see the Eiffel Tower in Paris or the Tower of Bridge in London, for example, they look so much like all the pictures you have seen that they are almost a disappointment. The Taj Mahal is different. However many thousands of pictures you have seen of it, nothing prepares you for the real thing. It was built as a monument to and a purpose for the wife of Mongol Emperor Shah Jahan, who had been his constant companion for 19 years. 20,000 workers toiled for 22 years to complete the world-famous structure. Every square inch of the building is a masterpiece of artistry. The marble mosaic that cover the buildings are so beautiful that any part of it could be displayed proudly in any art museum. When finally I prepared to return to California, we ate together at one of the finest restaurants in New Delhi, where Nelson took on food as a camel takes on water. It would evidently be a long time before he would eat that well again. At our parting, there were tears on both sides as we knew we'll never meet again. Perhaps I would have seen more if I had let my travel agent arrange a tour for me, but the sweet memory of my days with Nelson still lingers. A penniless man who slept under a bridge had enriched my life. What wonderful experience we can have if we are willing to explore Robert Frost's route less traveled. Opportunities for adventures await us at every turn of a life road, but will appear only once we learn to drive fear of the unknown from our minds. We must be courageous and open-minded enough to move beyond what is comfortable to us. 100,000 miracles are happening every day, and those who say they don't agree are those who neither hear nor see. Power performers understand that if you act as if exciting things will happen to you, they will. As a power performer, many new and exhilarating opportunities will come your way. Don't let the fear of unknown conquer your desire to expand your world. Use serendipity to make your life an exciting adventure. The key to making your life an adventure. You may be thinking there is too much like Pollyanna for you. You may be thinking, Roger, it's been too long since you had a real job. I can't be taking off for trips around the world. I'm having a big enough struggle just getting by one day to the next. I have a sick husband, a child who's flunking high school to worry about. To which I would reply, I got to you just in time. People who are obsessed with the going on in their lives are making a fundamental philosophical error. It's a very easy trap in which to fall, and I did it for years before I finally figured out the misery it was causing me. If you want to be an adventurer, if you want to be someone who is getting the most of your life, you have to stop thinking that good and bad things happen to you. Good things don't happen to you. Bad things don't happen to you. Life is what happens to you. The more you examine the events in your life and categorize them into good things and bad things, the more messed up you are going to become. I no longer believe that you should try to avoid having bad experiences. Let me see on the picture because I'm a bit thirsty. Mother said to her daughter, don't get too involved with him, dear. He'll only break your heart. What's wrong with a broken heart? Having your heart broken is one of the most exquisite experiences that life has to offer. Look how much fun and excitement her daughter is going to miss if she decides to tiptoe through life, trying to avoid having her heart broken. Recently, S.L. Porter bungee jumped from a 210-foot tower in California. That's unusual only because he was 100 years old. His children, who are 68 and 74, were there to watch him. He said, I told them, if I die, I die. I told everyone to bring a shovel and a mop, just in case. That's the spirit, Mr. Porter. You really miss a lot from life if you cocoon yourself from the so-called bad things of life. As Gustav Flaubert once remarked, that man has missed something who never stumbled out of a brothel at sunrise, feeling like throwing himself in the river out of pure disgust. The point is that your world exists anyway, only through your perception. When I was a young Buddhist monk in Sri Lanka, recited a little verse to me. I have long forgotten the word he used, but the message had affected my life. He said, I used to curse the flies in my little jar of ointment. Then I met Buddha, by which he meant discovering the truth. Now I bless the ointment in my little jar of flies. Once I went scuba diving in St. Thomas. I was on what I thought was one of the most beautiful beaches in the world. It was picture postcard perfect with a line of palm trees that follow the crescent-shaped beach out to the headland. The sand was soft, the water was blue, and I planned to dive around the coral reef at the entrance to the bay. From and I planned to dive around at the entrance to the bay. I started talking to an attractive woman who was also in our diving group. How are you? I smiled at her. I'm having a miserable time, she told me. I'm sorry, I asked. What's the problem? I came here on a cruise ship and it was the most miserable experience I ever had in my life. The food was awful, my cabin a broom closet, and the people are boring. I'm thinking of flying back. That's a shame, I told her. You should have been on my cruise ship. The food's great, everybody is having the time of their lives. She perked up and said, that sounds great. Which ship are you on? The Carnival. Then she got angry because she thought I was making fun of her. I'm on the Carnival too, she spat out. We swam out to the reef and the incredible variety of tropical fish fascinated me. Our guide gave us plastic bag of dog food and we fed them by hand to the fish. It was a marvelous experience. Suddenly, the woman who was so miserable started thrashing around and pushed up to the surface. I followed her to see what's the problem. I burst my eardrum, she was screaming. You were only 10 feet below the surface. You can't damage your ears at that depth. Well, I did, and I'm going to find a doctor. I can't wait to get out of this miserable place. As I said, paradise is only a perception anyway. She reminded me of something that I once saw scrawled on the wall. 50,000 lemmings can't be wrong. Remember, I was telling you about the children visiting Disneyland for the first time? Just as not everything is life is pleasant all the way we want it to be, so there were unpleasant things for them to cope with. The scary rides, the rain, the lines and the attractions. However, we took it all in wonderful experience. But what if you took them back to Disneyland every day for a week? How would they react? Probably they would do what we all tend to do. They will develop a list of likes and dislikes. They would have favorite rides and rides that wouldn't interest them anymore. In that way, they will gradually drain away the excitement for the experience, and by following the week, the thrill will be gone. Don't do that with your life. Quit evaluating every experience that happens to you and thinking I like this or I hated that. Good things don't happen to you. Bad things don't happen to you. Life is what's happening to you. The more you examine the events in your life and categorize them into good things and bad things, the more messed up you're going to be. Grow up and realize that so-called bad things are going to happen to you. Only rarely have I met people who told me that nothing really bad that ever happened to him or her, and I'm skeptical about them. Just about everybody, once you get to know them well enough, has had to have faced some awful things. 60% of the people in this country are close to someone with serious mental illness. For example, 25% of all women were sexually abused when they were girls, usually by their father or stepfather. Everybody has had their heart broken by a lover or a child. The majority of people will go through at least one divorce. Almost all people have to face the death of their parents. These things happen to everybody. They happen and will happen to you. The good news is that you get to choose your reaction to them. You can let them devastate you, or you can react like an adventurer and say, "Isn't that fascinating? I didn't know it was possible to feel so much pain. Now I feel as though I've been punched in the stomach, even though I know it's only emotion that are hurting. And I'm so depressed, I wonder how long that will last." The next time something bad happens to you, try relishing the experience. Don't ignore it, it will be foolish. Instead, realize that you will see the bad things that happen to you as some of the most exquisite events in your life, because your reaction makes things good or bad. Good things don't happen to you. Bad things don't happen to you. Life is what happens to you. The more you examine the events in your life and categorize them into good things and bad things, the more messed up you're going to be. You're going to become. When you realize that, it leads to a remarkable state of mind. You come to understand that joy is not the opposite of sadness, and triumph is not the opposite of defeat. And success is not the opposite of failure. They are contained within each other like a pearl hidden inside an oyster. Adventurers are not crusaders. Where do power performers get all the energy they have to do all these exciting things? One big reason they have high energy is that they don't waste it complaining about the way things are. You won't find them walking picket lines or rallying to protest acts of a remote foreign government. People with sense of adventure has no constituency. They have no desire to convert others to their way of life, nor are they great social reformers, for the simple reason they see little wrong with the world. So you'll find powerful performers in the York Harbour at Tahiti and New Zealand, not just in corporate boardrooms. These people know the importance of taking a break from the power and glory of corporate life to realize the unique satisfaction of a dream come true. They approach whatever they're going with the same gusto, the same drive to succeed. Above all, they have an incredible fascination for, curiosity about, and love of the life God gave them. They see themselves as citizens of the world who can enjoy the company of other people from all political, religious, philosophical backgrounds without feeling any obligations to persuade them to change. They live in a world of fascinations and understanding. They have a zest for living that transcends the ordinary lifestyle, and they derive an uncommon joy from privilege of being alive. The first secret of power performance is they have learned to make life an adventure. So I wish more people become power performers. Then you really live your life to the fullest. Thank you for watching the first chapter.